So we're doing some playing around on these dunes here in Australia, and we were at really low pressures just to make sure we had good flotation. This is a very heavy vehicle, so it requires lower pressures. And we were hard into a turn, and the tire popped off the bead. So the actual carcass of the tire popped loose from the bead on the wheel. These are a 17-inch diameter wheel. And we're going to try to use a compressor to reseat the bead. It's something that you have to do in the field pretty often. First thing we need to do is get the weight off of the tire, so we need to jack the vehicle up, and then we're going to hopefully have enough pressure here to reseat that bead. We'll see. So when we're using a high lift jack, especially on the sand, we need to get that weight distributed down to keep the jack from sinking. And then when you use the jack, you need to make sure you keep your body and your face out of the way. You don't want to put your body and your face over the weight of that handle. And then you always want to use gloves. You always want to be careful with yourself and your hands. There's lots of pinch points on these jacks. They can be pretty unsafe. So once the vehicle's stable and you've taken some of the weight off the tire, the first thing you have to do is check to make sure that the bead on the back side is still intact. That's going to be a key component. Otherwise, we've got to do something slightly different, and we may need to do some other things. But in this case, we want to just check to make sure that that bead is still connected on the back, which in this case, the bead is off both front and back, which will make it a little bit more difficult to reseat. All right, so since we've got the outer and the inner bead that's loose from the rim, we need to run a ratchet strap outside of the outside diameter so that we can begin to put force on the inside of the carcass to hopefully push those beads back out into place so that way we can reseat it with a compressor. Fortunately, we got a pretty good piece of hardware here that'll really help us. It's got a pretty good sized tank. It's actually, the compressor is much less important in this particular instance than the tank. The tank is where we're going to get all that volume from that we need to hopefully reseat that bead. And we're also going to actually pull the valve core out of the rim, which is going to allow us to flow the maximum amount of air pressure possible to reseat the bead. So obviously, we've got to be careful with this. We're in the sand, right? And we've got this little itty-bitty valve core that we don't want to lose in the sand. Now, if you've got a good quality tire repair kit, they'll typically have additional valve cores in there, which helps. So the function at this point is just to reseat the bead. We're actually going to need to take the chuck back off again, and of course we'll lose the air that we'd put in there. We'll reinsert the valve core and then fill up the tire to proper pressure. So I just put a bit of water on the outside of the rim here to help that tire slide against the bead surface over the safety bead, which all of those even-inched tired rims typically have a safety bead, and this 17-inch tire actually does, or wheel actually does. I can feel it in there, and the water will kind of help that slide over the safety bead and into place. So we're actually going to give this little compressor a run, and we'll see how she does. I think it's going to work. So obviously you don't want to just keep your face and hands and body and everything right next to the tire, because we don't exactly know how the tire's been compromised. Okay, so right now both beads have reseated on the wheel, and it's pretty obvious when that happens. There's a distinct pop when it slips over the safety bead. So now this tire is back on the wheel. It's actually fully back in service, and we can drive out on it. The only thing we need to do now is obviously remove the strap. We've got enough air pressure in here now. If you've removed the valve core, you'll need to reinsert the valve core and then bring the tire up to proper operating pressure.